They don't like Donald Trump, do they, Adria?
That is certainly right.
But
they view him as a loose cannon in many ways.
But they also don't like Hillary Clinton.
Yep. 30-plus years in politics, Hillary Clinton represents the establishment to millennials. And I think in many ways millennials look at these two options and they're just not satisfied. And so we're seeing, again, a generation that is apathetic and disappointed with the results, but yet they could have the biggest influence. Millennials make up 30% of the voting electorate, which is the equivalent to baby boomers this election cycle.
Yeah.
For them to represent their share of the voting clout, about 58% of millennials would need to show up at the polls this November.
Boy, I got to tell you, you hear from so many that say, you know what, I do have a stance. I do take a stance on this, and my stance is my vote doesn't count, and I don't vote. What's the percentage? That's a pretty good-sized percentage of millennials.
It is a good size, and unfortunately, millennials have bought into this idea. You're right, that their vote doesn't count. And what's disappointing about that is so often there's a couple things going on. They're looking at just the presidential race, and therefore they don't feel like their vote counts, so they don't show up at the polls at all. And they lose their voice being represented in their congressional race, in their Senate race, in their local races, their state races, and that's really dangerous when we have 30% of the voting electorate not showing up,
right? Because
they just simply don't think that their vote matters. But the other thing that I would say is even if you don't like Clinton or Trump, you are voting for an ideology, and the two of them do have different ideologies. And so I'm asking millennials all over the country with our work with Millennials with I'm Tomorrow is there's very potential that the next president will appoint quite a few Supreme Court justices. And so I'm asking them to consider something beyond just the next 4 years of the term of president and look at the next 20 and 30 years of the Supreme Court and which ideology you would like promoted for the rest of the country.
Is it, we hear a lot that millennials, when it really comes down to it, maybe gay marriage, they're far more tolerant to these social issues than somebody who's older. Is that true?
It absolutely is true. I think, a lot of that is focused in our college education. We live in somewhat these bubbles on our college campuses where some of those issues become really our sole focus, and then we graduate college and we realize that our first focus is finding a job and paying off our student loan debt. So I think both candidates can do a better job of communicating to millennials and answering some of the questions. Number one, the economy. Number two, fighting terrorism. These are some of the two big issues that millennials are really starting to talk about.
Andrew.
So, as a millennial, I'm going to go ahead and take this question here, and forgive my ignorance, but I've heard this so many times about... okay?
Just ask the question, please.
There's
no prelude to the question.
I know. I got to give it a. So I hear this all the time about which party is going to win to elect the Supreme Court justice, and I've got a huge problem with that at its core because here you're supposed to be an unbiased, judge and interpreter of the Constitution. But what it seems like is if you're a Republican, you're going to go and interpret the Constitution with that through that set of eyes, but if you're a Democrat, it's going to be the other way around. How is that even? It doesn't that show that the system has a major flaw already right there?
Oh, it absolutely does, Andrew. You bring up a great point. Yes, they're not supposed to create laws. They're supposed to interpret the Constitution. And historically, though, we have seen that the influences that the Supreme Court has, dating back to slavery and the decisions they made there, and more recently, decisions they're making on abortion, have a dramatic effect. And I don't have to tell you guys that. You know that. On the future of our country. So it's unfortunate. But in many ways, they do have a big say and a big influence. And unfortunately, they have, become a bench that is creating laws oftentimes rather than interpreting them, which is not their role. But that's the sad reality of it. You're right. It should just be focused on having unbiased people that don't have political agendas and are just focused on interpreting the Constitution. But I think we have to be realistic and look at the fact that that's not the system we have right
Yeah,
now. But what
yeah.
you brought up, kind of being fed up with that system, I think millennials in the same way are fed up with the partisan bickering and divide between Republicans and Democrats, which is why many of them are saying, I either won't vote, won't show up at the polls, or I'm going to vote third party.
Yeah. What's interesting is the subconscious, when you look at these two candidates, Clinton and Donald Trump, I see an older woman and this younger rebel who's however you want to describe Donald Trump. But I was really shocked to find out that Donald Trump is in his 70s, early 70s. I never knew that.
Yep, he's 70 years old, and it is interesting because a lot of people think millennials voted for President Obama because he was so charismatic, but then we saw millennials support Bernie Sanders, who was a elderly man with white hair, and you would think that what's the trend here? Well, I think it's not that millennials are going to go for Clinton or Trump because they're young and charismatic.
Yeah.
I think that they're very authentic. We're very true to our beliefs. And it's just that they really haven't bought into the vision of either candidate so far.
Interestingly, while Trump looks like he's 60, Bernie Sanders is only 45. I don't know if you know that.
Well, no, and I mean, piggybacking that point, it comes down to both these candidates represent what's wrong with the country today. You've got on Hillary's side, you've got the establishment that's been in there for so long. That's who's going to inherit the seat in one way, and then there's the other side that is can sometimes produce hate and stuff.
All right, very interesting. Audria Taylor, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Right, have a great day. We have birthdays here for this Friday, and we're at the 26th of August today. Here we go. So birthdays. Happy birthday to Sir Andrew John Bouck of Mohawk. There you go. Happy birthday.
That was the name submitted.
Love it. And celebrating this weekend, Carol Lafoche of New Hartford and Leah Lopez of Cassville. John Bouck, or Sir Andrew John Bouck of Mohawk, gets the cake from the Florentine Pastry Shop on Bleecker Street in Utica. Get a birthday on air by going to our news site at WIBX950.com. You can join the VIP club, or you can send us a postcard, 9418 River Road, Marcy, 13413. News in 2 minutes on WIBX.